Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 91 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Living with art. Living with art and living an artful life, I think, go hand in hand. And one of the things that I have been trying to establish in my own world, in my own life, is living with more artwork around me. Not just my own artwork, but the artwork of artists whose work I admire and try to collect. I think, one of the things that I think about learning photography, about being a photographer is, sort of the same thing that I often think about other art forms. If we wanted to be writers instead of photographers, and our objective was to learn how to be a better writer, of course, one of the things we would do is read books. We would read written words. We would read the way other people express themselves, and we'd use that as a springboard for perhaps our own inspiration. So my most recent acquisition has been this really beautiful photograph called Nightfall by a young photographer named Tammy Bone. And I saw this piece. That's one of the questions: is where do you find work that inspires you or that you are interested in? I was on a mailing list for an organization called the Center for Fine Art Photography in Colorado, and Tammy had won one of their competitions, and their email sort of announcing the competition announcing the winners of the competition had her photograph on it, and I fell in love with it immediately, and immediately contacted Tammy and worked out a transaction to make sure that I could have this piece and have it in my home and be able to look at it on a daily basis and be able to see it all the time. So I'm delighted that I have this piece by Tammy Bone, Nightfall, and I'm delighted that it shows me something every day that I don't normally see. It's not the way I see, it's not my photographic style, but I'm really intrigued by this sort of dreamlike quality of the image, certainly the beautiful quality of the print that Tammy has created, and this sort of dreamscape setting that reminds me of my own childhood. It reminds me of my children's childhood, and gives me this sense of joy every time I look at it. So living the artful life, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to collect photographs, although certainly I think, the author idea here, that it wouldn't be unlikely if we were trying to be writers that we would have a bookshelf full of books. And there are places where we can find photographs for less than a collectible image, an editioned image, the way Tammy's image is and the way many of my images are. And I'll give you a couple of examples here. Some of you may know or should know, if you don't, about the incredibly great 20 by 200 project. The 20 by 200 project was created by New York gallery owner Jen Beckman, and it was her idea that what should happen was that photographers should be able to get their work out into the public, and that it should be possible for ordinary folks to collect those images even if they couldn't afford an editioned image. So if you check out 20by200.com, you'll find Jen Beckman's terrific idea, and that's how I was able to acquire this wonderful photograph by Beth Dow, a photographer whose work I really admire. And those of you who know my work at least a little bit would obviously see the sort of similarities of stylistic idea and yet completely different subject matter of these formal gardens that Beth Dow has photographed. So a photograph that I obtained for a very small amount of money from this wonderful 20 by 200 project. I'll give you another example, and not to really sort of make a big deal out of the folio that Lenswork did of my work about a year ago, a year and a half ago now. But here is one of the ways that people have dealt with the folio. And I actually know that a number of people have done this, but this particular purchaser, somebody who purchased the Lenswork folio through Lenswork, took each individual image and had it matted and framed, and now has a hallway full of artwork. My artwork, delightfully. I'm really happy about that. But a hallway full of artwork that they obtained for a very small amount of money, and being able to have all of that artwork of a sort that they really like, all there right in front of them, is a wonderful opportunity. And So here's just a couple of examples, the 20 by 200 project, and then finding a way to obtain an artist's work in a folio edition or in some other sort of smaller image, smaller than, certainly these images are smaller than my large 16 by 20 images. But the idea that what we're doing is creating an environment that feeds us visually, and that we have that environment around us all the time. If you find something that you really just can't live without, you really need to collect it, you really need to live with it, and make it part of your world. That might be a book of photographs, and certainly I have a bookshelf full of books, and we've talked about that in previous episodes of Camera Position. But think about the idea of living an artful life, about living with art on a daily basis, and I think you'll find that making your own art becomes a little bit easier if you're living with art that you love, living with art that speaks to you. And so I'll put a link to Tammy's website on the Camera Position blog page, and here is in the enhanced podcast and also on the blog page is a JPEG of Nightfall and the way it's hanging in my bedroom, actually, in my house. I'll also put links to the 20 by 200 project and to Beth Dow's great website and her project In the Garden, that this great image that I have hanging in my studio space comes from. So think about the idea of what you gather around yourself for inspiration. What do you look at? How do you see? Not just through the camera's lens, but how do you see through other people's eyes? As a side note, there are 1 or 2 seats available in each of my workshops in Italy for this spring and summer. So if you're interested in learning more about that, send me an email at jeff@jeffcurto.com or stop into photographitaly.com and take a look at the workshops that we're offering this summer. And it's a terrific opportunity to go and photograph with a bunch of like-minded individuals in a beautiful setting and learn a little bit more about what you do with photography, how you practice it, the way in which you see and the way in which we can help you see a little bit better, and make a project of images that will last for a long time in terms of your involvement in the pictures and involvement in the space that we inhabit. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Camera Position. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. Camera Position is a proud member of the Photocast Network, your photo resource in the potosphere. photocastnetwork.com